Let me point something out real quick. There's no conspiracy here. It's greed. It's just straight up greed. It is get as much as you can, gobble it up by a small group of people. Okay? One of the problems with the Chomsky book is that it lends itself to conspiracy theory, right? It's not a conspiracy theory, but it lends itself to conspiracy theories. And something like Taibbi's Hate Inc. does the same thing. It lends itself to that. Even though all they're doing is saying, this is what actually happens. And there's actually, I saw a clip of Chomsky talking about this. It's very easy to do this, because what you do is you present the template. You feed the template only specific information. Then everybody kind of takes that template with that specific information and spreads it, and that's how you control the narrative. And there's no little cabal sitting in a room in a New York high-rise that's determining what the news is. You have within the organizations, you have, okay, what is going to benefit us, what is going to sell more papers, what would actually turn people off of the news if we printed it. That's what drives it. It's not a conspiracy to take over your life or anything. It's a conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy to get your money. It's just greed. That's all it is. Okay, so none of this is a conspiracy. None of this is conspiratorial. What I want to talk about and kind of put all the pieces together for you is to show you how we got to where we are now. Because if you go back and watch any of the CNN coverage from those first few years, it's boring. It's I remember being a kid thinking, why would anybody want to watch this? And then when headline news came out, and it was like rapid fire boredom instead of slow boredom. You know, I mean, it was just bad. But that's what news is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be sensational. So we get to 96 and we get to Roger Ailes. And like I said, he's got two different things. He wants to give a different storyline, present the opposite of what's being told in the quote-unquote liberal press. And he wants to make a lot. He wants to get as much money as possible. So if you look at, and I'm not saying that Roger Ailes sat down and said, okay, if we look at what has been popular since CNN went on the air to now, and we put all those things together and throw them on Fox News, I don't think that's what he did. I don't think anybody in Fox's organization did that. But by the time Fox comes along, all these different things I was talking about before with the Donahues and the Inside Editions and the Ricky Lakes and the Jerry Springers and the Geraldos and all that, what Roger Ailes was able to do, and the success of Oprah, she has a huge impact on Fox News, whether she realizes it or not. But what he does is he takes kind of like the temperature of the culture at the time, and by the culture itself, through all those different means, had developed a specific taste. And so Roger Ailes gave it to him. And it's fun. You hear so many different funny takes on the quote-unquote fair and balanced. Well, originally it was you report, or we report, you decide, and then it changed to fair and balanced. Of course, the joke is that it's not actually fair or balanced, but neither is the liberal side, right? There's no balance. And that what Ailes was actually pointing out was the imbalance in news coverage. It was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke. But what Fox News ends up doing is, you know, if the left says right, then or if the left says green, then we're going to say blue, right? Or, now let me rethink that analogy. If the left says yellow, we'll say blue, when really the story is green. There we go. So that's actually pretty good. I like that. I may have to write that down. But anyway, so that's what he's doing. He's just giving the opposite. Now, MSNBC, when it first comes on, is not the liberal soccer mom home for news that it is today, right? Where the liberal the liberal left comes for comfort, right? It's not that. I will say Oberman has a lot to do with that later. That and Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews masquerading as a true political. He's supposed to be like Tim Russert, only on steroids, like literally, because he's screaming where Tim Russert talked. But anyway, so what Ailes does is he notes, and you can see this in you can see it today. He takes all this, the taste, like I said, that had been created by all these different styles of shows, and he puts it in one network and sticks it on the air. And after the first couple years where they fuss about the fact that there's too much conservative bias, you're just, you're showing your blue card or your red card there with the Republican Party. He decides, okay, well, and they come up with this ingenious way to do this. They come up with they get Greta Van Susteren from CNN and put her on Fox News. And then later they get Shep Smith. That's what it is. And they stick him on Fox News. And they're like, look, we do have balance. See, these two people are liberal. And I remember there's a clip of Rupert Murdoch out there somewhere where a reporter asked him, what do you say about conservative bias on Fox News? And he says, there's no conservative bias. We have Greta Van Susteren. Like, that just solves all the problems. For 1 hour a day, they were liberal, and then the other 23 hours didn't matter. And we'll talk about Hannity and Combs in a minute. Because there's one thing that Fox News didn't do, that they didn't make famous, but they did perfect it. And that is the quote-unquote debate show, right? And which would evolve. It has since evolved. And CNN didn't invent it either. There were several different styles of these debate shows. Debate shows during the 60s and 70s. And it was so rancid that SNL, of course, parodied it with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. And of course, if you've never seen it, you need to, because it's hilarious, where they're arguing over some actor and something that the actor had done or worn or something. And it's just a whole, almost 10 minutes of them just insulting each other. And that was the parody, and it was pointing that out, but of course it didn't stop it. Saturday Night Live doesn't have the power that we think it has. They do bring a lot of attention to different things, but as far as swinging culture, they don't have that kind of power, which is why it's so funny when people get all upset over Saturday Night Live doing something. It's like, they don't actually have the power you think they do. But anyway, so you see, if you look at the early Fox, and even today, like I said, you see how all those different components that have been spread out across the media landscape during the 1980s and 1990s had come together. And he was able to fulfill that taste, that desire. And he created what's known as the Fox effect. Because the other thing that Roger Ailes realized, when you sit down and you watch an NFL or NBA contest, long before the MLB did it, long before the NCAA did it, it was the NBA and the NFL that used these bright graphics, and they drew your attention in, and they had very colorful commentary. They started to cross boundaries in their coverage of a player. They would start asking, what does he think? One of the funniest things is Frank, I can't remember his last name now, but the guy who does the Madden impression. And one of the funniest things I've ever heard was he was doing a Madden impression and said, here's a guy, when he puts his glasses on, he can see better. But you know, and of course he's mocking John Madden, but at the same time he's also pointing to a fact that we started to get personal with our athletes. We started to expect them to be personal with us, to give us a glimpse into their life. What's it like to be a Michael Jordan? When Jordan had the gambling scandal in the early 90s, I think it was 93 or 94. Everybody was just so upset. Why? You wanted to see how human he was. He is human, and he has this gambling thing. You know, why are you? That doesn't make any sense, but whatever. It's never made any sense to me when we pry into these people's lives, and then when we find something that makes them human, that makes them weak, we cry foul, which is just ridiculous. But the sports had gotten to that point where we were starting to get more personal with our athletes. Again, the graphics were bright, they were big, so you could see it, so you could understand everything. And Elle said, huh. And so you start getting the Fox effect, the beginnings of what would become known as the Fox effect. The bright graphics, getting personal with the people, looking into the background of their lives. There was a huge scandal in the late 80s, I believe. This man named Gary Hart, and he was like the promise of the Democratic Party. He was going to save us from the Reaganites, right? And this is before Dukakis, right? In fact, it's because of Gary Hart's scandal that Dukakis ends up getting the nomination. But they found out that Gary Hart had an affair. You know, we find out that Trump has an affair, and we're like, well, of course he did. But back then, shock, you know. And as part of that, and Els catches on to that too, is this idea of let's dig into people's past. Let's find out what's going on. So all of that starts to add up. And then, as if by like some kind of divine intervention for Fox News, the Lewinsky scandal broke. And this is what made Fox News. And during the Lewinsky scandal, all of the things that they had just kind of been piecing together and exploring kind of just made sense, right? And because now you have the Chiron at the bottom that's talking about like prosecutors looking into the stains on Lewinsky's dress. It's like, oh, seriously? What a headline, right? And of course at the top you've got breaking news, and there's no breaking news, right? But they're going to put breaking news up there to make you think there's breaking news. And of course they do the graphics and the NFL style, you know, competition logos and that kind of thing. And of course the headlines are getting more and more abrasive. They're getting more and more pointed, right? Everything you see on cable news today is a product of them watching Fox News develop their personality as a network during the Lewinsky scandal. And after that, MSNBC, you see the shift in MSNBC and CNN dramatically after that. And like I said, it's not till Oberman that MSNBC becomes in-your-face liberal. For a long time, they kind of stayed away from it, but then when they put Oberman up against O'Reilly, all gloves were off by that point, because people had accused Chris Matthews, but for they could argue, you know, that no, he's not that liberal. I mean, look how he treats these Democrats and that kind of thing, which is all show anyway, because none of it's real. Because again, it's all about marketing. It's all about getting your money.